Remember back in the 1990s, there was a little movie called Forrest Gump, and Forrest Gump seemed to be involved with all aspects of history from an era, the 1950s and 60s. And we have an individual in football that has a similar story, seems to be involved with everything that was happening on. Timothy P. Brown of footballarchaeology.com joins us to tell us about this special individual from football's past. And it's all coming up in just a moment.
This is the Pigskin Daily History Dispatch, a podcast that covers the anniversaries of American football events throughout history. Your host, Darren Hayes, is podcasting from America's North Shore to bring you the memories of the Gridiron, one day at a time.
Hello, my football friends. This is Darren Hayes of PigskinDispatch.com. Welcome once again to the Pig Pen, your portal to positive football history. And it is Tuesday, and like we do traditionally every Tuesday, we talk to Timothy P. Brown of footballarchaeology.com. Tim, welcome back to the Pig Pen.
Hey, Darren. I guess I should say aloha in this instance.
Aloha indeed.
Aloha.
Yeah, very, very nice segue. Very friendly. That is one of your more friendly greetings of coming on to the episode.
I must say, I think I've been to Hawaii 4 or 5 times. I love that place. It is so cool.
That's a bucket list for me. I've not even gotten close to it yet.
It is. You just walk into that place or places, and just like every care in the world just disappears.
Well, we appreciate that you're still sitting down. I was expecting maybe you're going to stand up and you had a hula skirt on or something. So we appreciate that you didn't go
maybe
that
next week.
far
Maybe
with
next week.
Maybe. Of course, Tim, you are segueing us into one of your recent tidbits. Maybe this isn't a recent one. I lose track of. You have so many good ones out there.
It was actually December 7th.
Oh, okay. So this was fairly recent, just a few months ago. And you titled it The Paul Withington Story. What can you tell us about this story and Mr. Withington?
Yeah, so I think, this is one of these guys that no one's ever heard of, right?
Yeah.
But a really interesting life that this man, led. So I said aloha because he was raised in what was then the territory of Hawaii. And but he goes off to Harvard and plays football there in 1908 and 1909. So, that kind of places him historically. So he was born, say, in 1890. And in 1909, he's a second team All-American. So, very, very solid football player. And he was one of the first, what they called roving centers. So he played center, but back then you played center on offense and on defense. And so, teams traditionally would all 7 linemen or forwards would, they stayed in the same position on defense and just lined up against the guy that they had opposed when they were on offense. So all 7 men would be on the line of scrimmage. And then you'd have, your quarterback or fullback would be, 30 yards back. And then the other 3 backs were in some kind of either a diamond formation or something. But as teams started throwing the ball and, just opening up a bit more, defenses had a need to be able to get to where the ball went, as opposed to assuming that it was being run right up the gut every time. And so the center started backing up off the line, which initially they called a roving center. And then later on, people who did that, they started calling them backers up. And then that name became linebacker, right? So, that was kind of the evolution of that kind of position. As you took men off the line of scrimmage and made them more movable and, pursuit oriented. So he was one of the first guys who did that. He was also generally just a great athlete. He was Harvard's top middle distance runner. So here he is playing center in football, and he's a middle distance runner. He captained the crew team. He played baseball for them. He did a bunch of stuff. And he was a great sailor, which he had really picked up in Hawaii, and then, actively did that later in life. But so, he gets out of Harvard, spring of 1910 and goes to Harvard Medical School. So obviously he's a smart fellow as well. And while he's going to med school, he is an assistant coach under Percy Haughton, who was Harvard's professional coach by then. And, one of the, great coaches of the, first 2 decades of the century. And so he's coaching Harvard, but in the summer of 1915, when he's, I think, before his last year in medical school, he spends a summer in Europe treating wounded British soldiers, from World War I, and then comes back. In 1916, he's Wisconsin's football coach. And then, by the time, then not too long after, well, it's another year, or at least 6 months, the U.S. enters the war in April of 1917. So then he enlists as a physician, and he's stationed with the 89th Infantry at Camp Funston in Kansas. And so if you're familiar with Camp Funston, that was the place where the Spanish flu first appeared, or at least was first diagnosed. So, you got all these soldiers living.
It sounds like a place where disease would incubate, funks and
Yes.
just kind of.
Yeah. And soldiers going every which way, getting transferred here and there, jumping on trains, and, even if just on leave. And so, that contributed to the spread. So anyways, he's at, he's at the center of history, even though they didn't really recognize it at the time. So he's at the center of history there. Eventually, July or sometime in the summer of 1918, 89th Infantry goes over to France. They're involved in, probably the Musar gone, but he ends up earning a Silver Star because he's treating soldiers under fire, under direct fire. So this, I mean, he's a stud football player. He's a physician. He's demonstrated his bravery. So, I mean, he's just like, is there another All-American person you can think of like this? I mean, just
He sounds like the Forrest Gump of football is what he
yeah,
sounds
yeah.
like.
So then, they leave all these, they couldn't just send everybody back right away. So all these troops are still sitting in France. So they have this big American Expeditionary Force football tournament. He ends up captaining the 89th infantry team, and they win the championship. So I mean, and there were some really tremendous football players. A lot of guys, early NFL players, played in that tournament. And so he does that. Then he returns, he goes to New York to practice medicine, and while he's there, Percy Haughton by then was the coach at Columbia, so he assists Percy Haughton while he's practicing medicine. And then Percy Haughton dies partway through a season, so he takes over as interim coach. And eventually he returns to Hawaii to practice, sets up a successful practice. He's out sailing the South Seas and doing things like that. But he also got called up. He stayed probably in the reserves, I would assume, Army Reserves throughout the time. And he gets called up. And guess where he's stationed on December 7th, 1941? He's at Pearl Harbor. So, this guy, he served throughout the war. I think he stayed primarily in Hawaii, but I could be wrong on that.
He's like an event magnet.
Yeah. I mean, if there's something that's going to happen, he's going to be there. Right. So, just crazy the things that this guy saw and did, and just like he's in med school and he goes and sails across the sea to go treat British soldiers. I mean, just he could have done anything, but that's what he did. So just really an admirable guy as far as I can tell. Really somebody special.
Yeah, pretty remarkable story, and especially somebody that few of us have heard about before, and just great that you bring to light him and preserve his history and his role in world history and in football history. And you do some amazing things with some very much unknown items and people like this, Tim, in your tidbits. And maybe you could share with the audience where they can find your tidbits and read more readily.
Yeah. So, I mean, just to, set the stage a little bit, I'm sitting here reading through articles on one thing or another that I'm trying to research. And I just come across other articles that it's like, oh, hey, I didn't know about this. So that's how I uncover some of this stuff. But anyways, so, my site is footballarchaeology.com. It's on Substack. So, you can, go on there, check it out. And if you like it, subscribe. If you subscribe, you'll get an email every time I send out a story. And that email, will contain the full story and images. You can also just get it on the Substack app if you prefer not to clog up your inbox. Yeah, and that's about it. Other than that, you can subscribe for free for partial access rights, and then paid subscriptions give you access to everything. And you can also follow me on Blue Sky under Football Archaeology, if that's your preference for getting notified about new stories.
Tim, that's some great Gridiron information and history, and we really appreciate you coming on and sharing that with you. And we can't wait to see what you have for us next week.
Very good. Look forward to it.
That's all the football history we have today, folks. Join us back tomorrow for more of your football history. We invite you to check out our website, pigskindispatch.com, not only to see the daily football history, but to experience positive football with our many articles on the good people of the game, as well as our own football comic strip, Cleat Marks Comics. Pigskindispatch.com is also on social media outlets, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and don't forget the Pigskin Dispatch YouTube channel to get all of your positive football news and history. Special thanks to the talents of Mike and Gene Monroe, as well as Jason Neff for letting us use their music during our podcast.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.